We are a little bit of a new player in the Canadian market coming over from New Zealand. So again, it's really great to have the opportunity to talk to everyone about the technology today, just run everyone up to speed what's going on here in Canada. I see a couple of familiar faces in the audience today, a couple of new faces as well. So it's great to have everyone here, and hopefully there is something here for everyone. And I'll hopefully proceed now to get started with the webinar as I see a few more people here. Just quickly running over how the webinar is going to work today, what we're going to be in store for. Just a bit of background for everyone so you can still get out if you want to. The problem is going to be the first thing that we look at talking about today, and that is the marine plastic issue. It's quite a prominent issue right now, and I just want to address that, really what it is, what the problem is causing, the detrimental impacts of that, and then tie things back into the Canadian market, specifically look at how that problem is quite large here in Canada and what the Canadian government is actually looking at doing to combat that problem. We're looking specifically at something called the Ocean Plastics Charter that they have released. And that was a really big motivation for us coming out here. So I'll make sure to touch on that as we keep going. We'll then obviously transition things over to the LittaTrap, have a little look at that, what we're doing with the LittaTrap, what it is, what it looks to combat, and how that's going to help us meet the guidelines that are continuing to be set by the Canadian government. Then look at some cost-saving benefits that are associated with the LittaTrap, how we can actually use this as a tool to help our clients save a bit of coin, which is very important, especially in today's day and age. And then depending on how we're doing for time, look at a few relevant case studies before going into some questions. Fingers crossed everyone's got this little question bar at the bottom of their screen here. Kind of how I envision the questions going is, anytime I say something that triggers a bit of a question for you, please feel free to write that in anytime. And I'll just continue with the presentation. Then at the end, we'll circle back and answer all of those questions for you. So just starting with the problem, as I discussed, and how that really relates to the Canadian market. And obviously coming from New Zealand, I'm sure you can tell by the funny accent, it was, a bit of a new decision to come out when we came out about 3 years ago. We shot a whole lot of promotional material, so we were ready to hit the ground running. And obviously we're a bit more of an ocean-based country, and a lot of that material we shot kind of heroed the LittaTrap in a more ocean-based scenario. And so I guess the first question we got when we came over here is, well, a lot of this is the oceans, and we don't have a lot of those here in Canada. We're more of a lake-based problem. Do we have that same problem you're having in your oceans? Should we just maybe send you back where you came from? But unfortunately, the same problem that we're facing on our oceans is very prominent here in Lake Ontario and the Great Lakes. And that was no more evident than in a recent study done by the Ministry of Environment and the University of Toronto. And what that study showed is certain areas of the Great Lakes and Lake Ontario are actually showing a higher concentration of marine plastic in certain areas than even that seen in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And that's very concerning because the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is something we've always regarded as the hotspot for all marine plastic in the world. So to see some parts of Canada and the Great Lakes on par or even increasing on that is something that's quite concerning, and definitely something we'd like to continue to address. And that comes more concerning when we look at this map here of the Great Lakes, and we can see that that entire body of water is indeed connected. This is a body of water that makes up, I think I saw, around 20% of the world's water supply. So it's a very important one to make sure that we are taking great care of, and it's not something we're doing to the best of our abilities right now. Just a bit of a plastic pun for everyone in the audience that's in the plastic game, switching from the macro side of the plastic problem there and looking at it just on a micro scale, a little bit smaller. We've got my friend here, Tim the Trout, on the left-hand screen, poor little fish here, who was recently pulled out of Lake Ontario's Mexico Bay, and he'd grown up with a poor rubber band around his body there, and he'd had to grow up like that. And he's just one of our many fin friends that's growing up like this, having to live like this, and is subject to a lot of the punishment that we as a species are inflicting on them. So both on a macro and micro level, we're seeing it as something that's very prominent in the Canadian market at the moment, and something that really needs to be addressed. And again, just touching on some of those impacts, so we've backed up that there is quite a lot happening right now. And what exactly is that doing? And I am going to touch on suspended solids through the presentation as well, as that's something the LittaTrap looks to eliminate as well. And those have been proved to be very harmful to aquatic life and reducing fish spawning and survival. Marine plastics, quite self-explanatory. We're having a lot of birds and fish eating those, and they're causing a lot of adverse effects across marine species. And people are often proved to now become sick as they become in contact with this contaminated water, and the fish that are, consuming great amounts of plastic are starting to have noticeable adverse effects on humans as well. So we're definitely seeing that the problem is active and some really negative repercussions of that as well. And so what's the Canadian government starting to do about that? Well, we were really encouraged, and a really big reason for us coming out here actually is them, yes, addressing this problem and now looking to do something about it. And that was prominent in the Oceans Plastics Charter that was released in 2018. A great little piece by the federal government there that I will share a hyperlink for at the end of the presentation, so I won't bore you with too many of the extracts now. But basically what it outlined was a desire from the Canadian government to step up and say, hey, we want to be the leader amongst G7 countries. We want to be the guy that's seen removing these pollutants, advocating technologies such as the LittaTrap, looking at raising public awareness, collecting data, and removing these this debris and pollutants from our shorelines. So that was really, really encouraging for us that they acknowledged, yes, there is a problem, but we want to step up and be the leader right now. And that was really encouraging for us, encouraging enough to put myself through a Canadian winter for sure. And now just transitioning back to what who EnviroPod are and what we're doing here. So EnviroPod was incorporated way back in 1996 in a small town in Australia called New Zealand, as we like to say over here, and a little bit of an ongoing joke. And that joke was never more prominent than a recent trip I took to High Park before the coronavirus and saw this map of the world here, and New Zealand definitely looking a little bit worse for wear, kind of a subordinate of Australia there. So hopefully we can, use the LittaTrap to put us a bit more prominently on the map going forward. But we were established way back in 1996 in New Zealand, part of a much larger group called Stormwater 360. And Stormwater 360 is Australia's leading catch basin company across, again, both Australia and New Zealand. And we do have over 50 years combined experience in stormwater management at this company. We can see every year of that here. My two bosses, who are also very prominent in the Canadian market, Mike and Greg, back in a time when afros and orange jumpsuits were cool. So it really does speak to the amount of experience we do have with a whole lot of technologies. Again, just here in Canada with the EnviroPod to promote this LittaTrap, this very new solution for which there are now over 25,000 installations worldwide, and those spanning across New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and California in America. And we are very established here in the Canadian market now, myself over here in Toronto, been here for about the last year now, and we've been here as a company for about 3. So it's been really good to have this established presence, and I'm always an email or a phone call away if anyone has any questions, wants to run through another webinar for people in their company, and we do always have an abundance of stock here in Ontario. And now what is the LittaTrap? So the LittaTrap is our marine plastic solution. As I've discussed, Mike and Greg, great stormwater engineers, great minds, but first and foremost, they were just free divers getting out into the Auckland Marina and seeing firsthand the vast amount of plastic that is, in our marine environment. They were seeing it themselves. And they thought with their backgrounds, well, I've got the expertise to do something about this, and I think I will. And that's where the motivation for the LittaTrap came from, acknowledging that this isn't just a municipal problem, a manufacturing problem, or a private problem. This is an everyone problem. And so they wanted to create something that was very cost effective, that could be used by these ranging sectors, and was also hand maintainable, so that it is a very easy and viable business solution. We don't want to target ourselves to just these municipalities. There are a lot of projects there for the LittaTrap, but we want to advocate its use in business and manufacturing settings as well. I think the latest number I heard is around 8 to 10 million tons of plastic going down our waterways every year. And with 80% of that coming from land, stormwater drains are the ideal first defense location. So they designed the LittaTrap to be just that. And that's really how it's being positioned at the moment, as a pre-treatment or standalone treatment device to deal with sediment, and then this marine plastic element as well. Just running over some of the key benefits of the LittaTrap, and as I do, got a quick installation video on the left here. Feel free to watch that one as well, and ask any questions at the end, please, if you are interested in how this installation process works at all. First and foremost, though, the most obvious benefit is stopping plastic leaving your site. That's really, really important one. Obviously, that's what the LittaTrap's been designed to do, and it's been designed to catch particles 5 millimeters or larger. And the real motivation for that is that's the difference between a micro and a macro plastic. So it's going to allow us to catch all those easy to get pollutants. You know, if you name it, we're catching it in a litter trap. You've got your plastic straws, your cigarettes, coffee cups, all that stuff's coming down. And it's going to allow us to get those easy wins, the really easy to get pollutants without, I guess, making our maintenance cycles too long and too frequent. In saying that, we do work with a lot of clients across many different sectors that are interested in catching more sediments, more microplastics, maybe more nurdles. We'll touch on that in a little bit. And we do offer some optimal liners that really increase the performance of the LittaTrap further. And again, we will touch on that as we go along. Reducing your costs is a really big one. So dealing with the blockages of detention tanks or pipes further downstream of the LittaTrap is going to be quite expensive. We see that range anywhere from $500 to $5,000 generally. Those can be really expensive bills. So by putting a LittaTrap upstream and catching a lot of that stuff, we're going to decrease the risk of that happening. And to the engineers in the audience today, the idea of a treatment train, very big at the moment, I'm sure we all know. Maybe you've got an expensive stormwater technology downstream, maybe a jellyfish, a storm scepter. Those are very expensive technologies, we know, and the maintenance cycles are also very high and expensive. So we want to make sure we're taking care of these technologies, and by putting a LittaTrap upstream, we're going to take a lot of burden off those technologies, therefore increasing their lifespan and decreasing the maintenance cycles on those. There are minimal maintenance costs associated with the LittaTrap, as we've touched on, due to that hand maintainable nature, and it is very easily retrofitted into existing sites, something often quite difficult with stormwater technology. And finally, we are seeing reduced resuspension and loss of capsule total suspended solids with the inclusion of a LittaTrap in a stormwater drain. This is something some people, you know, we've had a bit of pushback on originally. They think, how can a 5mm mesh catch, you know, something as fine as a particle? And what we've found with the LittaTrap is it's drastically increasing the performance of a catch basin by having that in the drain. And we are seeing up to 50% TSS removal. So I will, as the presentation goes on, continue to address how that happens, but we are seeing 50% TSS removal with the inclusion of the LittaTrap. Just touching on some of the components really quick that make up the LittaTrap, you know, it is a box and a drain. We've got to ensure it's a very well engineered box and a drain, and it absolutely is. Starting with the bracket here, you know, our stormwater technology's got to take some pretty high weight at times. We've got to imagine a scenario where this LittaTrap bag is completely full. We've got that once in a decade storm coming through. A lot of water is being pushed into our drains, and that means a lot of weight for our LittaTrap to take as well. And we've got to make sure it's designed to take that weight, and it absolutely has. This bracket here designed on a computer software called Finite Analysis, and it's been ensured to take it, to ensure that it can take 300 kilograms of weight. And so we're going to have enough safety to really maintain in these once in a decade storms that we do see, because that's when we need our stormwater technology to be working at its best. New Zealand's a pretty big sporting nation. You know, we love our sport, and we couldn't quite figure out a way to incorporate a rugby ball into the design of the LittaTrap. But another one of our really big sports that we love is sailing. And we took a little bit of motivation from sailing, where the batten is used in the mast. And that's used to give the mast some shape, some integrity, a bit of definition. And that's exactly why we've used it on the LittaTrap bag here. We can see this photo in the middle here with the batten around the side of the LittaTrap. That's going to stop it from bulging and ensure that the shape is maintained well. I'm sure we've all gone to our rubbish bin before. We've got our bag in there with the trash, and we've gone to lift that out. And the weight is so unevenly dispersed that it all falls to the bottom, and it actually makes it really hard to get that bag out. You know, you've really got to pull. It's really heavy at the bottom. It's really awkward. By putting a batten around the side, we're going to ensure that that doesn't happen. The weight is very evenly dispersed, and it's always easy to get that bag out. By stopping it bulging, it's also going to prevent that bag from hitting the sides of our catch basin, the walls there. And that's going to ensure water can always flow out the sides very easily, and it's going to maintain a good water flow. We do also provide a range of sizes here in Canada and Ontario, and we haven't found many catch basins, if any, that we haven't been able to work with so far. And I just included this photo because it's a common question we get of a manhole catch basin, just showing that we can get a LittaTrap inside of those. We just use an adapter kit, essentially letting us to put a square peg in a round hole, if you will. And yeah, if you have any questions on the sizes, please feel free to drop those in, and we'll discuss those at the end. Probably the number one question we get everywhere we go with the LittaTrap is, what about when it's completely full? Won't it cause flooding? And the LittaTrap has been designed with an overflow bypass, as we can see at the top there. So as this LittaTrap's completely full, we can still allow good water flow. I have been told by the top stormwater engineers at our company that the catch basins here in Ontario will only pass water through at 20 litres a second, even in those once in a decade storms. The overflow bypass on this LittaTrap has been designed to pass water through at 60 litres a second. So we've always got 3 times the safety we need, even in these once in a decade, really harsh stormwater events. Obviously at this point we are going to be letting our pollutants out because the LittaTrap's completely full. And that's why we do recommend these are maintained at around 80% capacity to keep everything working as it should. But we do understand situations happen, and that's no more prominent than right now with the coronavirus pandemic. I'm sure maybe for some of our municipal partners, it's a lesser priority to get out there and maintain a LittaTrap, and it might get neglected a bit. And so we've got to make sure that in this event where it can't be maintained and a lot of water flow still coming through, that it is made to take that, and it is from both a weight and an operational standpoint. Unfortunately, we will be letting the pollutants out at this point, but at least we're not causing any flooding. Just going back to those liners that we touched on a little bit before. So again, the LittaTrap designed with a 5mm mesh there, but we do offer ranging solutions to those. And we've got a couple of liners that I wanted to talk about today. As we can see by this photo on the left, those are just installed into the bag itself. The first one we really want to promote here in Canada is the sediment liner, or the geotextile liner for the engineers here. What we see generally, the common practice at the moment during that construction phase is just to stick a sheet of cloth underneath the catch basin to make sure no sediments escaping during that construction phase. And as we all know, that's very counterproductive because now the catch basin's not working as it should. It's completely blocked, and so we are going to see flooding. As a result of that, a lot of times what will happen during that operational phase is someone will come and just stab a couple of holes in the bag there, which again is very counterproductive because now we're letting those very sediments that we're trying to stop getting into our catch basins. So we kind of wanted to propose this solution with the LittaTrap of installing that LittaTrap with the inclusion of a sediment liner bag inside. And that's going to allow us to have a fully working and functioning catch basin. Our overflow bypass is still there, but we are going to catch all these sediments. At the end of the construction phase, if the site permits it, we can look at simply uninstalling that LittaTrap, removing that LittaTrap bag and leaving the LittaTrap itself in as best practice. Or we can uninstall the entire LittaTrap and take a lot of those parts from site to site. The majority of parts for the LittaTrap are going to be reusable time and time again. Talking a bit about microplastics already throughout the presentation, pretty common theme at the moment. First talking about this nurdle liner here. We call them nurdles in the industry, also plastic pellets they're called a lot. Those are those little tiny balls that all plastic starts off. And if we go to any beach anywhere in the world, I'm sure all of us have seen a couple of those on the shoreline in the sand. They're becoming very prominent on every beach in the world at the moment, something that's very sad to us. And so we've developed this nurdle liner here, 1000 micron, that enables us to work with plastic manufacturers. And we've implemented these again, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, and having a lot of success working with our plastic manufacturing partners to ensure that they are complying to no plastic loss from their sites. Microplastics or things like catching PVC cuttings are very prominent at the moment, and we also have this 200 micron liner to deal with that. So again, we do have the ability to really upscale the performance of these LittaTrap liners. The only thing to consider is we are obviously going to be increasing our maintenance cycles when we include these. So it's really just about catering to what it is that the client needs. Going back to that operational side now and how the sediment removal process works. So as we know, we've got our catch basins here, and sediments and marine plastics or plastics, build up around the location, whether it's a city street, a car park, whatever the case may be. And as we get our rainfall events, all of that's then going to be dragged and ushered into our catch basin, where hopefully, in an ideal world, our LittaTrap sits. And due to a permeable bottom that we've put in, or some previously caught material, the rate and the force that the water comes in with is going to be significantly decreased by having that LittaTrap in there. And that's what's going to allow our sediments to sit very safely at the sump of the catch basin. And I've got a video here that's hopefully going to show us how that works and expand on it a little bit more. So this first video on our left here, on my left, that's a regular control catch basin without a LittaTrap. Ideally, all those sediments would just sit at the bottom anyway in our control catch basin. But what we see here is that water's coming in with quite a lot of force, quite a lot of velocity, and something as fine as a sediment is never going to be enabled the luxury to sit comfortably at the bottom of the catch basin there. And so it's in a constant state of resuspension, constantly going out our outlet pipe, and we're losing all those sediments. Well, we can see the second one here on the right with the inclusion of a LittaTrap. The bottom of the catch basin is remaining largely untouched because of what we touched before. And that's going to allow our sediments to sit very safely at the bottom of the catch basin. And as I discussed, got this diagram at the bottom here. Don't worry about it too much. I can send anything through to people afterwards. But we are seeing up to 50% TSS removal with 4 liters a second with the inclusion of a LittaTrap. Wouldn't you believe it, we were set to do our ETV testing to certify this in the last week of February. Unfortunately, coronavirus came along and did have other ideas for us, but we have done some third-party testing here in Mississauga at a place called Good Harbour Labs. Not sure if anyone's heard of that. But if any of the engineers in the audience are interested in those third-party results, we're absolutely happy to provide you with those, and hopefully we will be getting our full ETV certification as soon as possible. But again, it isn't the LittaTrap that's getting this capture, it's just enabling the catch basin to work better than it otherwise would. It's also important to know once we've got those sediments, we are retaining them. They're not being lost through the process of resuspension. And so we've been doing our scour testing as well to again ensure that we're not only capturing but retaining those suspended solids. And again, we tested the LittaTrap against a control catch basin without a LittaTrap in. These green lines are just our regular control catch basin. And what we can see is as the flow rate increases all the way from 1 to 15 liters a second, these green lines, the amount of lost sediment is continually increasing because that water comes in with a lot of force. It's causing that process of resuspension. These blue lines here are our LittaTrap lines, and we can barely see them, which is great to see. Shows us we're not seeing any resuspension. Even as the flow rate increases all the way to 15 liters a second, we are retaining all this previously captured sediments. First and foremost, though, the LittaTrap was designed to be kind of the industry standard marine plastic solution. And we wanted to test to the industry standard, which at the moment is something called CalTRAS, the Californian Trash Protocol. Basically how this worked, we can see starting with this photo up the top here, this orange basket, kind of make up like sort of almost like a plant mixture, you know, but instead it's plastics, and it's a whole variety of newspapers, you know, polystyrene, different pieces of broken down plastics, and then send that down a long tube there, kind of replicating a stormwater event, sending all our plastics down almost like a city street equivalent into the LittaTrap. And the objective of this test was to completely fill the LittaTrap with these pollutants to blind it, make sure that it's not only capturing those pollutants, but then leave the water on for an amount of time afterwards to ensure that we're also retaining them. Similar to what we saw with that sediment, you know, are we not only capturing the pollutants, but retaining them as well? And what we saw is, again, as far as the test would let us go at 15 liters a second, is over 99% capture of those gross pollutants, 99.2. The only thing we were losing from memory was just a couple of pieces of broken down polystyrene. And again, this is just with that standard 5mm mesh, seeing over 99% removal of all those pollutants. Going back to that hand maintainable maintenance side really quick that we did talk about, just showing how easy that is. It's as easy as lifting a LittaTrap bag out with the straps that we see on the side there. LittaTrap bag should cap out at around 50 kilograms of weight, so we feel confident at any time. If you have 2 people, that's a very comfortable lift. If you're not wanting to get into the catch basin, you know, maybe you don't want to bend down and do some damage to the back, a very fair observation. We do provide the specification for a couple of J hooks, so you can simply stand up, put those hooks into the levers there and pull it out that way. A very, very easy process. All you have to do then is tip those pollutants out into whatever we have brought with us. Maybe it's a bin or a bag, and then also place the LittaTrap bag back in the catch basin again. It's a very easy 2 to 3 minute process that only has to be done around 2 to 4 times a year. So really think it's a really easy way to take action. And I've said just before there that the bag generally caps out around 50 kilograms. We do deal with some very rare sites where we're seeing quite a lot of sediment capture within the LittaTrap bag. Something that's hard to quantify, so we don't necessarily advocate, but a bit of an added bonus. Once you've got some build-up at the bottom of the LittaTrap, it's almost made a force field of sorts, if you will, and a lot of that sediment is going to fall right on top of that, and we will see quite a lot of sediment capture within the bag from time to time. And that could make it too heavy or awkwardly heavy to get the LittaTrap bag out of the catch basin. And so we do offer the ability to get in there with a Vactor Truck, the LittaTrap bag is a pretty durable product. It's had to be designed to take the harshness of these Canadian winters at -20 and the horrific heat of an Australian summer at the other end of the spectrum. So it's a pretty durable product, and we can get in there with a Vactor Truck as well. All that we ask is that we're putting a rubber boot at the bottom of the Vactor Truck there to ensure that we're not seeing any rippages to the bag. Transitioning now to some cost-saving opportunities and benefits that we see with the LittaTrap. And first and foremost, stormwater credits, where I do the majority of my work here in Ontario, are a very prominent thing. Waterloo, Kitchener, Mississauga, Guelph, and Newmarket all currently offering stormwater credits on those stormwater fees and taxes that we see on sites. And these can be quite expensive. We've worked with clients where they're thousands of dollars, so a 15% break on that can be pretty significant. And we're currently doing a project with the city of Mississauga to see what credit clients would be eligible for using a LittaTrap for increasing water quality, removal of sediments and marine plastics. And we're very encouraged with how things are going there with them. And that's some data we hope to have a little bit more on, a little bit later on the year. Again, coronavirus, unfortunately, pushing things back there, but really encouraged with how that's going. We hope to have some pretty tangible results there and something we can look at rolling out across other of our municipal partners. So yeah, feel free to stay tuned with that one. Hopefully we'll have some more good news there soon. Just a couple of others as we've touched on through the experiments there or the lab work that we've done. LittaTrap's catching 99% of gross pollutants and 50% TSS removal. That equates to 75% of the total load coming into a catch basin just with one cost-effective device. The cost of unblocking a drain, we touched on that, can be very, very expensive. By putting a LittaTrap upstream, we're going to reduce the risk there. There's going to be a lot less need for a maintenance contractor, and cleaning a LittaTrap versus cleaning a catch basin, the LittaTrap is a lot cheaper. And also touched on before how the LittaTrap will often catch a lot of that grittier sediment in the bag itself. And some contractors, one I talked to the other day, Dutton Stormwater in New Zealand, actually, they said they've reduced the cost of cleaning a catch basin with a LittaTrap in it versus one without. The reason for that is they're catching a lot of that grittier, harsher sediment in the LittaTrap bag itself, leaving much finer and easier to vac out sediment at the bottom of the catch basin there. And as we know in the operations game, time is money. So this is something that has the potential to have some cost-saving benefits as well. And going back to the idea of a treatment train, again, for the engineers with us today, a pretty prominent discussion at the moment. And these two technologies we've got here, at the top a jellyfish, the bottom a storm scepter. This jellyfish just been hammered by quite a lot of sediment, and this bottom one, a storm scepter, not meant to deal with floatables like cigarettes. And again, these are very expensive technologies, things we don't want to see taking this level of hammering because of what we're paying for them. And by putting a LittaTrap upstream, we can prevent a lot of that. The LittaTrap's also a lot easier to maintain than something like a pond or a wetland. And one final note on the idea of treatment trains, the City of Toronto is currently only offering offline jellyfish. We're hoping with the inclusion of a LittaTrap upstream, we can advocate for online jellyfishes there. Again, quickly touching on the applications, we've talked about most of these, but as a pre-treatment or a standalone treatment device, we see great application there. And working with a lot of private side clients as well in manufacturing, industrial, food processing, and retail stores where they have things like car parks, and we're seeing quite a lot of runoff. And then our municipal partners as well, areas, smoking areas, pedestrian streets, city streets, and car parks, all very high in regard to pollutants. And just going to a few examples here, just breeze over these. I see we're already at the 30-minute mark. Time flies when you're having fun talking about the LittaTrap. I'll breeze over a couple of these now. And again, if you've got any questions about them, or you want to talk about some other case studies at the end, feel free to do so. But one of them, we've been doing some work with Brampton, the city of Brampton, at their Sandalwood yard. A very foreign concept to a New Zealander is the idea that the snow that falls on our city streets can become quite dangerous. I wish someone had told me that before I went head over biscuit a couple of times during the winter months. But what they do at the city of Brampton, where they're a little bit smarter than me, is they get out on the streets and they remove all the snow. They take it to their Sandalwood yard where they leave it to melt, so it becomes less of a safety hazard for the public. You know, unfortunately, we at EnviroPod were a little bit too slow to figure out the slippery nature of the snow. But one thing we did identify quite quickly is the amount of buildup we see within the snow. You know, I'm sure we've all seen it, how things like cigarette butts and coffee cups seem to just really stick and merge into the snow. And also sediments are very prominent, very seen in that as well. And so what we did with the city of Brampton was kind of reverse engineered the idea of identifying a hotspot. It was really great that they were taking all the snow here, because they were bringing so many pollutants to one place where they could only melt and run off into a few catch basins. So they retrofitted their entire yard there with litter traps, and we're really, really happy with the amount of runoff we saw there, all those captured pollutants. And that brings me to a couple of ideas that we really want to push here in Canada this year coming up. Is first the idea of the snow melt. It is a really, really scary time actually, just to see how many pollutants come off. You know, we kind of have that grace period during the winter months when not a lot's running into our catch basins, and then all of a sudden overnight when that snow melts, it's just compounding, and there's so many pollutants running into our waterways. So we really want to work on the idea of identifying that, where these high areas are, and making sure we're taking care of that period. The second idea that I'm starting to touch on here is the idea of a hotspot. You know, not all catch basins are built the same in regards to marine plastic and sediment capture. We're not going to see the same return on a one-way residential street as we are on a busy Queen Street location, for instance. So a matter of working with our municipal partners to target these hotspot areas where we really need to get litter traps in, and that's something we love to be a part of. And building on that, again, the idea of a litter hotspot. So we did some work with the City of Kitchener last year, a 3-month trial on a busy Queen Street location, as I say. And there were 433 pollutants caught in the 3 months. We can see down here, that's just 1 month, this blue diagram. Pretty startling how much we will see. And that would equate to around 1,700 over a year. I know I just touched on the idea that not every catch basin is built the same, but, you know, just humor me for a second here. I did some research. City of Kitchener is home to around 12,000 catch basins. If everyone was even catching half of what that caught, that's, you know, likely millions of pollutants depositing into the Grand River in Kitchener alone every year. So it's a very startling number. And then we, you know, extrapolate that over Ontario, over Canada, over the world. It definitely shows just how big the problem is right now, and why the need for action really is upon us. Also seeing great use for the technology in residential areas. This one in Richmond Hill, I think we have a subdivision going in later this year, which should be really great. You know, anytime you've got infiltration, you're going to need some pre-treatment there, and there is nothing cheaper than the litter trap. And I guess these photos kind of bring me to one other question we get very commonly with the litter trap, and that's what about leaves? Won't it just clog? Won't it fill up too quickly? And generally the answer we are finding is no. There is 45 litres of storage in a litter trap unit. So we have got quite a lot there. And in addition with leaves, you know, what we'll see is, yes, maybe they initially take up quite a lot of room, but as they continue to compress and are broken down, we see them take up less and less room. And if people are smart about their maintenance cycles, you know, instead of doing them sporadically, really make sure we're doing our maintenance cycles before and after fall, we can really get away with quite low maintenance cycles. We are seeing anywhere between the 2 to 4 a year is very manageable here in Canada. Toxic materials is a discussion we want to have as well. Another big talking point this year here in Canada. Cigarette capture, like anywhere in the world, is massive here. It's the #1 pollutant we see in every catch basin. I think a lot of people aren't aware that it is a plastic, and they don't have as many problems flicking the cigarette butt away and not thinking about it. But it's a devastating pollutant for our waterways. It has the potential to, you know, devastate and obliterate all marine life it comes in contact with within the first 96 hours. So it's very frightening, and something we need to continue to do something about. And something I've been seeing in Ontario quite a lot is actually the capture of hypodermic needles and sharks. We've been seeing quite a lot of this, and this is another really big health and safety concern. You know, we'll have these eventually washing up on places like our beaches, marine environments that we interact with, a very serious health and safety concern. And so we want to continue to identify areas where those are coming down and how we can really prevent those, because that's, again, quite a scary one for sure. And again, just look to breeze through these last ones really quick. I see we are doing, you know, on the long side for time already. But we do a lot of work with plastic manufacturers, something that's really cool and really important to us. I talked about that with the Nurdle liner at the start, the plastic pellet liner. Done a lot of work in Canada working with PDI Bulk, Polytainers, and Hood Packaging, all very established plastic manufacturers here in Canada. And it just highlights this photo on the bottom right here. as I skip through of just what that plastic pellet capture is looking like. Again, that's just one catch base, and we can see a whole lot of resin pellets in there. So the need to use this as a tool is absolutely now on the manufacturing side. And its application in the private side is something we don't want to breeze over as well. You know, this is a supermarket chain, Farros, from Auckland, New Zealand. And it has really great application in this business side. You know, the idea of plastic capture is very prominent right now, things like the Ocean Plastics Charter. We really want to see private companies taking initiative as well. And we feel like the LittaTrap really caters to this, and a lot of private clients are having great success with it because it is very easy. And also it's going to allow you to track a lot of data, you know, great things for your CSR reports to say, hey, this is exactly how many pollutants we stopped this year. What we found at this site is generally what we find at all private sites anywhere in the world. It's sort of a rule of thumb for us so far. You'll see about 300 pollutants for a single catch basin at a site over a 6-month period. So again, around 500 to 600 pollutants for a year per catch basin on a private site. And that again is quite a lot, and something we really want to work on. You know, it's a really good tool to empower these private companies and help them do something about the problem. And the last thing I want to touch on before we wrap up the presentation, just a good last one to tug on your heartstrings a little bit, the idea of using the LittaTrap as an educational tool, working with the next generation to again educate and empower. The motivation for this started back in Wellington, New Zealand, where this group of students went out with some local educators, did some snorkeling, and they were just fascinated, so happy with the amount of fish and marine life, coral they were seeing in their harbour. But they were also horrified by the vast amounts of plastic that they were seeing, and really horrified again, and wanted to set out and do something about it. And that's what led them to do some research and end up getting in touch with us and say, hey, could we maybe have a couple of LittaTrap units to look over? And we thought that sounded like a great idea. But again, this was quite some time ago now, and it started what has been a really ongoing successful project of developing a really great methodology of how we can, you know, use this in a very safe setting, not getting the kids interacting with the pollutants, but setting them up with some third-party educators, getting them out there to interact under safe conditions where they have tally sheets, they can collect the data, look at what's going down on stormwater drains. This is a really empowering tool to educate the next generation, something talked about in the Ocean Plastics Charter, and also use kids as a great advocate of the technology. You know, we've had some really powerful results. This one in Wellington, the children demonstrated their findings to members of the community, the board, teachers, small businesses, and it led to some pretty big change within the community. A lot of small businesses looked at putting LittaTraps in. The city council, you know, had a lot more city bins going after this. So they can be a really powerful driver for change, and something we've really looked to build on. So yeah, that pretty much brings me to the end. I thought that was, again, a great one to end it with, tug on the heartstrings a little bit. And I'll see if there's any questions now, so we can have a chat. Again, if you've got any and you haven't put them in so far, please feel free to do that now. It would be great to hear from anyone. Any questions we might have in regards to any of the technical stuff, maybe a couple of examples, feel free to fire those off. I see there's none at the moment, but we can circle back. I will just go through to, the last slide, do an overview, and then if there are any questions, we can circle back to those. If not, a great place to leave it there. So again, what we looked at today, Canada, along with the rest of the world, is facing a marine plastic crisis. We can definitely see it. We're starting to see the adverse impacts of that as well. And the Canadian government has really set out to do something about that by proactively, you know, putting the Ocean Plastics Charter in place. And we are seeing, you know, an effort to do better, and that's something we really want to be a part of. And we believe the LittaTrap offers you the most cost-effective way to do that, prevent plastics and sediments leaving your site. There's ranging cost-saving benefits as well associated with that, and the technology has been used by municipalities, private sites, and manufacturers across Australasia and North America. So a very versatile product that has done some very harsh Canadian winters, some very harsh Australian summers, and we are seeing it hold up under quite a lot of stress. So definitely an application for it in today's time. And I see we've got a couple of questions now, so I'll just breeze over those now. First one I'm seeing here from Sarah. Hi, Sarah. You might have already stated this, but what do you do with the collected plastic fragments and waste? And that's a great question. There's a lot of things we are doing or what clients can do. It's an ongoing discussion for us here, wanting to be part of that circular economy. So unfortunately, at the moment, a lot of it will just go back to landfill. There are organizations such as TerraCycle that recycle a lot of this stuff and reuse it. And we work with people like them when we can and where it's possible. We're also really big on educational projects at the moment. So we work with the University of Toronto on a lot of our projects where we can. We've got some people at the trash team there. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of that. And what they'll do, they'll collect a lot of, we'll send the contents to them. And before it's being disposed of, we're using it as a great educational tool because it can be really powerful in that sense. You know, we do see the LittaTrap as a really good Band-Aid and something that needs to be used for the foreseeable future. But again, it is a little bit like a Band-Aid, you know, but what we can do with these pollutants by working with people like the University of Toronto is educate the public and say, hey, in this area, we're catching a whole lot of cigarette butts. Here's the data. How can we use this now to educate the public? Maybe there's more signs and infrastructure that need to go up to discourage that kind of behavior. So there's opportunity for recycling and research a lot of the time, but a lot of the time it is just that first offense, make sure we're getting a lot of the stuff out of the waterways. And seeing another one from Jim here. Hi Jim, good to hear from you as well. Is oil something that could be a problem that the LittaTrap could catch? So oil, yeah, is a bit of a tough one. The LittaTrap, unfortunately, not working there at the moment with that 5mm mesh. There are a lot of other technologies on the market. Won't touch on them too much today, but feel free to give me an email anytime that will help you with that. Something we have been discussing, there's a lot of oil absorbers on the market at the moment. And those will, you know, sit inside a catch basin and absorb all the oils coming in. The problem a lot of them are having is there's nothing for them to sit in. They need to go at the bottom of the catch basin. So they don't have a whole lot of application at the moment, but they could work really well in harmony with the LittaTrap because it's that LittaTrap bag there. Something like an absorber could just sit inside the bag itself and offer potentially the most cost-effective way to remove those oils as well. So the LittaTrap could actually help people remove a lot of these oils for sure. It's just not necessarily as a standalone. And I hope that answers everyone's questions. Again, if there are any more in these dying, fleeting seconds, please feel free to put them up now. But again, thanks so much everyone for coming along today. It's been great to talk to everyone. And again, I see some new faces, some familiar. Again, really appreciate everyone coming out and learning a little bit more. You know, I'm always a phone and an email away anytime. My contact information's there on the screen now if anyone wants to jot that down. I think it was on the invite as well, but please feel free to jot those down now. We're pretty active on the socials as well, you know, wherever's your cup of tea, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, pretty common across there, just posting a lot of feel-good stories of people using the LittaTrap and really using it to good effect. So yeah, please feel free to give us a follow on there anytime. And again, don't stay a stranger. I'm very happy to take emails and calls anytime. And you know, if we want to look at running webinars in-house with members of your team to educate them a bit more, always happy to do that. So hope this isn't the last time we're seeing anyone today. Again, it's been really good and really appreciate everyone coming out. So thank you and goodbye for now, and hopefully talk more soon. Bye everyone.